Hello, bros. We're back with the After Midnight Ghost book. And this is a 1981 publication, and the story that I'm going to read next. Philip Evans's The Gold Medallion is long, so I'm not going to beat around here. On the day he received his nomination to play for England, Graham had Hadfield, is that Hadfield? Hadfield, decided to keep a diary. Wednesday, 7 November. For weeks, the newspapers have said that I should play for England. I knew I was in with a good chance when the New England manager, Brian Keyes, came up to watch our team play several games during the past 2 months. But when it actually happens, when you're picked to go into the pool of players, it's still nice. But as I've just started this notebook, maybe I should fill in a few points about myself. I've always been very aware of death. All my grandparents had died by the time I was 6. My elder brother, Gregory, died from a rare illness, a brain tumor, when I was 8, and he 2 years older. I lost another brother, Stephen, when he was only a few days old. My father named us after some of his friends who had died in a disaster at some pit, but it was his own death when I was only 10 that most affected me. He was a miner, one who worked at a colliery in Dodworth, just to the west of Barnsley. Several times in the previous years he had come home with a long face, having heard news about disasters at other collieries nearby. But although the risks of a stroke of bad fortune in mining are high, you never believe it will happen to you. So with my father. He worked at a colliery whose coal was used to feed power stations. One morning he said goodbye to my mother and me, and it was at about 11 o'clock that my mother opened the door to an official from the coal board who told her that the cage carrying the men to work had run loose and had crashed to the bottom of the shaft. All the men aboard had been killed. Dad had been one. Of course, you get over these things in time. My mother remarried soon afterwards, married a schoolmaster, a teacher of languages, who she had met at church. We moved to live in Silkstone, a village just outside Barnsley. I was lonely at first, cut off from all my friends of the past few years, but I gradually made some new ones in our neighborhood. And then there was our football. Dad had always encouraged me when we had lived just to the south of Oakwell, the ground at which Barnsley played. He had taken me to see game after game, had played football with me for hours after he'd come home from work, even when he was tired out. And in our new home in Silkstone, I made sure of using the wide spaces in which to practice running and ball control. As time went by, I found that I was doing fairly well at the game. Barnsley is one of those centers that breeds many gifted players, but has been unable to hold on to them when they grow older. And there were always those pessimists who compared you to players of the past, and always unfavorably. Things were going well for me. I played for the school team and found myself chosen to represent Barnsley schoolboys. But there was this old codger who drove me mad. He used to turn up to all our games and make a point of talking to me as I was on my way home after the game. He would mention some previous player who'd become an international, poke me in the chest with a grimy forefinger, and say things such as, "Thee, lad, that's not good enough to polish the boots in the niver will be," and fix me with a firm stare. Never. That's just a big bit of puff pastry when compared to him. If he made remarks like that once, he made them a million times. But when I got home, my stepfather would calm me down and say I must be some good, else the old man wouldn't bother to talk to me. Sure enough, in time I came to be signed by Manchester United, and the idea of death came close again. The night before I was supposed to make the trip, my mother came over to me while I was watching the television, pressed something into my hand, and said, "Here, love, take this." It was the gold medallion my father had worn every day, ever since I could remember. It was the size of a five-penny piece, and I learned then that it had been given to my father as a present by a friend who'd won money on the pools. My father had worn it to work every day, and come to think of it, as being a good luck charm. One day, some years later, he had taken it into a jeweler's and asked for a motif to be engraved on it. The motif of a wink, as if to say, "To bad luck, sod off, you can't affect me." Good luck it certainly brought him, for in the following years several friends were injured or killed at work. But one day he had to take it into the same jeweler to have the chain mended. They asked to keep it for 24 hours, and it was on the following day that my father died. That was the charm my mother gave me to take to Manchester. So naturally, I thought of the medallion as being a good luck charm for myself. I went to Old Trafford as an apprentice turned professional when I was 17 and made my league debut a year later. But those 3 years were a rough, tough, hard time. In schoolboy football, I had grown used to having lots of time and space to play with, but as I grew up, I became used to receiving the odd tackle that was brutal. Had to get used to playing with and against people who had more determination than skill and were eager to put you out of games. Had to get used to tackling with much more severity, and all the time there was were those reminders of that crash in February 1958 when more than half of the passengers aboard the plane trying to take off at Munich airport died. The Manchester United team was on its way back from Belgrade, where the players had just drawn 3-3 with Red Star in the European Cup quarter final leg. Among the dead had been Tommy Taylor, who had himself come from Barnsley, had been signed for almost £30,000. I remembered hearing his name spoken around Barnsley, remembered hearing it spoken with awe, and I would find it impossible to forget that crash with so many memorials of that tragic day peppered around the club premises. Which brings us up to the present. In the past 6 years, I've gained much more skill, much more flair, much more stamina. There was a turnabout in international football in England in July with the new manager, Brian Keys, being brought in to organize things and make sure that we got good results. His first objective is to get us into the World Cup final tournament. No, Tuesday, November 13. I've been training hard all these past 3 days, and the great delight is that I have been chosen to play against Yugoslavia. I saw the program for tomorrow's game. It listed many other players, then came to me. Graham Hadfield, Manchester United, winger who has been developed by the club and has been capped at youth and under 21 levels. Born Barnsley, uncapped, age 21, a young player whose sureness of touch and speed with the ball have often made their mark. That's a program that I'll make sure to keep until my dying day. We've been drawn inside a qualifying group with Northern Ireland and Yugoslavia and got off to a bright start with a victory in Belfast. But when the Ulstermen came to Wembley, they held us to a goalless draw. Thanks, bruv. Yugoslavia had also made a bright start, defeating both England and Northern Ireland in Belgrade. But they tend to play far more effectively at home than abroad. Lost by 2 goals when they went to Belfast, and are now about to play us at Wembley to make sure of qualifying for the final stages of the competition proper. But there is always this in their favor. A draw would suit them fine, but we, on our side, would have to win to be sure of going through. Wednesday, 14 November. Not surprisingly, we were all keyed up for the game. We knew we had the determination, the will to win. We had three fine players, almost world class, in our side. But would we have the luck that makes results go our way? Or would we have the bad luck that makes you wish you were dead, that makes all your attempts at goal go just outside rather than inside the goalposts? It was a mild night for mid November, but the game was hectic from the first whistle until the last. I remember groaning inwardly when one of the Yugoslav defenders crashed into our main striker, Neville Smith, who had only played a couple of games since being out of action for a few weeks with a strained groin. He lay writhing on the floor for a time, grasping his right knee where he had been kicked savagely. The referee took the name of the defender, which made him feature in less forthright a manner for fear of being caught again and risking expulsion. But you can imagine our joy and the fury of the Yugoslavs to discover that we'd been given a penalty. A decision that would have gone the other way if we were playing the match in Belgrade, and we scored. I became increasingly glad we'd been fully briefed about the Yugoslav team. We went further ahead by another goal. Let me repeat that. We went further ahead by another goal. They got one back soon afterwards, and the last 10 minutes were all blood, sweat, and tears, trying to keep the pressure up front in order to keep their defense stretched and making sure that we didn't let in any more goals. Our goalkeeper, Kevin Durkin, made an astonishing save from one of their forwards when he was clean through, leaping to his left to turn the ball round the post. Our tall center back, Tom Kennedy, made a series of superb interceptions when some of their players appeared to be straight through, and I swear that many of us fell to the ground in a mixture of both exhaustion and relief when the final whistle went. Where is my home? In the United States. Saturday, 17 November. Stuart Patterson gave a party to celebrate our victory. He played alongside me in the United forward line, but his country, Scotland, had been eliminated from the World Cup. It was the same old story. They had played magnificently against West Germany, but pitifully against Finland and Switzerland. Their low point was reached when they lost at Hampton to Switzerland, a game they should have won by a handful of goals. Mind you, this is supposed to be a ghost story. So at some point here in the next 15 pages, I expect something besides soccer, or football as they call it. The usual thing, gra. The hell's gra? Stu said when I met him at training later that week. We murder the big boys, murder them, but we can't play again the trash. We can't play again the trash. And he joined me in a jog along the cliff, the United training area. He jumped on me the night of the party and told me that there was an Italian girl coming, and he made sure to introduce me because I could speak Italian. Good night. When I explained that I only knew a few words that I'd learned from my stepfather, he waved my protestations aside and said that no one else in the room spoke her language, but I did, and I'd have to talk to her. Okay. And with that, he walked quickly away to make sure the record player was working all right. About 10 minutes later, he came up to me with this girl, made the introductions very quickly, and then left us. It helped to break the ice, and I could see her eyes still smiling as I found out a bit about her. Her name was Jane Piatti. Her father was Italian. He ran a restaurant in Manchester, and her mother English. Her father came from a village just outside Florence, a village called Impruneta. Had met Jane's mother when she was visiting Florence about 20 years ago. Had pursued her to Manchester, which was where she lived, and began learning the language and customs. They married almost straight away and began a family soon after. Fairly tall, Jane was an intriguing amalgam of looks. She had inherited some from her father, the olive complexion and hair the color of sable, and some from her mother. She had the full mouth that was similar, and also the most riveting pair of eyes, the color of cornflower blue. It was those eyes that I came to find most intriguing and magnetic as we got to know each other better. I felt as though they were seeing right through me, almost as though they were x raying me, whenever I looked into them, as though they were almost ghost like. During that evening, we danced a fair amount, talked about our tastes in books, in films, and television. You know, the type of conversation you have with someone you meet for the first time. Stuart had been thankfully wrong about her inability to speak English, for she spoke it very well with a nevertheless personal and quixotic mannerism. And as we left, I made sure of taking down her address and telephone number. But I have found that the demands made on my time even greater after that England game. I have been forced to spend increasing amounts of time at training sessions for the England squad, lured on by the prospect of doing well in the tournament in the summer. The new manager likes to make us train in small groups, urges us to do this wholeheartedly and with enthusiasm, and takes us aside from time to time in order to discuss our particular playing problems, our strengths and weaknesses. It is a far cry from those days when, as an apprentice, I'd spend as much time washing out the training rooms and cleaning the boots, doing things like that as well as training. Wednesday, 9 January. The draw for the World Cup was made yesterday. We had hoped for an easy draw and are delighted to find ourselves drawn in a group with Kuwait, France, and Hungary. Of our group games, there are 3 to be played in Florence and 3 in Bologna, whatever, however the hell you say it. Other games are being staged in Genoa, in Milan, in Turin, in Naples, and in Rome, which is where the final is due to be held. And all this gives us a 5-month time span in which to prepare, to study the strengths and defects of the other teams who have qualified, and polish up minor features in our own play. Luck has played its part again. The manager believed very firmly in watching as much continental football as possible, and this took him off to a series of games in France, in Hungary, and in Kuwait. He has come back with first-hand information as to what progress our first opponents in the tournament are making. Information he has been able to pass on to us at our regular squad meetings. Thoughts about who were the speedier players in the teams he had watched, which players had the best ball control, facts even about the goalkeepers. For example, we have learned that the Kuwaiti goalkeeper Saad is left-handed, a point that may come in useful if a penalty is ever awarded against his side. He has also encouraged us to feel part of a squad by making sure that the same players are invited to his squad get-togethers, despite the fact that sometimes some of them are injured. It's done wonders for the morale of the team, being sure of meeting up with your friends on a regular basis, and it certainly helps to damp down the feeling of disappointment when someone is left out of a team. Wednesday, 20 February. We played against and beat West Germany in the stadium at Munich. Our team included 10 players who had been present when we had beaten Yugoslavia 3 months ago. And during that period, we had played together 4 times in practice sessions, working with the ball on each occasion, working to improve our skills. We played sessions of keep ball, sessions in which we practiced 1-2s, sessions in which we tested both our heading and tackling abilities, sessions in which we practiced our volleying. Then we spent some time working without the ball, working on our acceleration, turning around quickly and stopping. We won the game against West Germany by 3 goals to 2, our scores coming from Neville Smith, who scored twice, once with his head and once with a glorious volley from my center when he was 15 yards out, and Jim Noble. I felt quite pleased with my performance, although I was helped by the fact that the defender opposite me, Klaus Flug, had a wretched game. But we had been blessed with luck that their superbly gifted player in midfield, Manfred Hagen, had been injured and was unable to play. On top form, he is capable of doing anything. I'd seen some film of him and been most impressed. He had wonderful acceleration, marvelous ball control, the knowledge of the exact moment in which to make a pass or when to slow the play down, and above all, a cool temperament. You would never see him being disconcerted. I left Munich the following morning, being absolutely sure that we would hear much of him during the World Cup finals. Sunday, 31 March. I was woken up late this morning by Jane. She began playing with the necklace around my throat, turning it over and over, asking questions about it, propped up on one elbow and staring gravely at me. She kept turning it over while I answered her questions and told her the story about my father, about how he had believed it to be a good luck charm, about the wink carved onto it, and about how my mother had given it to me when I had come from Barnsley. She lay back and snuggled up to me. I have to go away for a time, she said suddenly. That statement woke me up a lot. Where to? I asked. To Impruneta, she said. My aunt has been taken ill, and I have to go and look after my uncle. She paused, but it will only be for a few weeks, until she comes out of hospital. I'll write to you and tell you how things are. I lay back and tried to relax. If she had to go, then she had to go. And in any case, I hope to be very caught up in football for the following few weeks. Wednesday, 3 April. I hate farewells, and I was silent as I drove Jane to the airport. She was booked on a flight to Milan and would go from there by train to Florence, where she would be met by her uncle. She was quiet also. We made small talk when we reached the airport, and she watched me sign a couple of autographs for schoolboys. Then, with about 10 minutes before her plane was due to be boarded, she burst into tears and cuddled up to me. Could I beg something from you? She asked. Of course, I replied, being the soccer star that I am. Could I take that medallion? What? Please, Graham, please. She pronounced my Christian name as though it was 2 words, with a very heavy stress on the H, and she looked directly at me with those ghostly blue eyes. I took the thing off, pressed it into her hand, and walked swiftly away. By then it was my turn to be crying. Wednesday, 17 April. We played a friendly against Brazil, who were over on a long tour of Europe before the competition proper started. They had recently had a change of coach, a man who was prepared to try and build in some of the harsher features of the European game, prepared to sacrifice some of their native skills at ball control. They had a masterful player in midfield called Machado, but for the most part, the rest of the team played as if they were involved in a wrestling contest. The match ended in a 2-2 draw. I was taken off halfway through the second half, covered in a mass of bruises and small cuts. I was very depressed not because of my injuries, but because I had not been playing at all well for the previous 10 days. You can get used to high tackles, trips when opponents try to gouge your eyes out or spit at you, but you can never get used to having lost form. Sunday, 28 April, I was left out of the club side for yesterday's match, and I wasn't even named as substitute. Since the reserve side was playing very well, it was decided to keep it playing together. So I spent the afternoon away from the world of football. If they don't want me, okay, stuff them. I began to want Jane back. Sunday, 5 May, I was left out of the team again on Wednesday in the match in the UEFA Cup, and again yesterday. I did go to the game on Wednesday since we were playing against AC Milan, and in their team was a midfield player who played for Italy, Dino Lanati. He played with a great sense of calm and authority and seemed to have all the time in the world when he passed the ball with great precision over distances both long and short. And there goes my computer. We lost at home yesterday by the odd goal in 5, but I didn't go, nor even play for the reserves. I was so pissed off with being off form that I pretended to have injured my back, but it was during the night that I had become most upset. It happened first on one night when my father paid a visit to my room. I slept alone then and had done ever since Jane had gone away during the previous month. Dad just came in, sat down on my bed, and began talking in a low voice. He looked exactly like he'd looked when he was just going to work. Now then, lad, he said, I know, and the nose that's just been playing silly buggers. He pointed at my chest with his forefinger. Get on that pitch and show 'em what you can do. That there medallion brought me luck, and it will do to you. Another jab in my chest. Get a move on. And with that, he disappeared. I woke up to find myself covered in sweat. Of course. Why hadn't I realized it before? That was why I'd been playing so wretchedly for the past month. My divorce from the good luck charm. I had to get the thing back. So I rang Jane in Italy, begged her to return the medallion as soon as possible, and promised to send her another replacement token. Yeah, no. Sunday, 9 May. I may have been dropped by the club side, but I was still part of the England squad and chosen for the home international championship. I played against Wales and Cardiff, where we won by the one goal, despite a superb performance by the Welsh goalkeeper, John Watkins. And I also played in the second game against Northern Ireland at Wembley. So we were putting things together neatly in time for the World Cup, building up a close understanding. Yeah, well, you want to feel something? Don't be a bitch. Sunday, 19 May. I may have been dropped by the club side, but I was still part of the England squad and chosen for the home international championship. I played against Wales and Cardiff, where we won by the one goal, despite a superb performance by the Welsh goalkeeper, John Watkins. And I also played in the second game against Northern Ireland at Wembley. So we were putting things together neatly in time for the World Cup, building up a close understanding. But on the night following that game, on the night of the 15th, I had a very depressing nightmare. I had received several more nightly visits from my father. On several occasions had woken up screaming with terror, and so they had found a room for me to sleep alone and not disturb anyone else. That night I was visited by Jane, who appeared wearing a dress of midnight blue, a dress that set off acutely those cornflower blue eyes of hers. She was walking towards me slowly, but when she was about 10 meters away, her eyes opened wide. Suddenly, she screamed, "No, no, no!" and pushed her hands out ahead of her. At the next moment, she fell and began to bleed across her front. I woke up shrieking, sitting up in bed with my arms in front of me, and then I heard myself repeating for several moments, "Carissima, why didn't you tell me?" Repeating that over and over again. This dream stayed with me the following day, and as I had been playing so ineptly, it came as no surprise to me to learn that I had been dropped for the game at Hampden Park against Scotland. To be truthful, it was a very good game to miss. Those Scots, they're always inclined to treat the game against England as though it is the last moment on earth, and since they'd not qualified to take a team to the World Cup finals, they'd go into tackles with animal ferocity. On our side, the list of players who'd been slightly wounded grew longer and longer, and Jeff Hardy, a key player in midfield, received a tackle brutal enough to have him carried off the field on a stretcher. I was very pleased when the game finished as a 1-1 draw without further serious injury to our team. Here's some emotion, you fucking. There you go. There's all the emotion you get from me. Shut up! I woke up another horrendous nightmare, again about Jane that night, and by that time I was prepared to blame all my troubles on the medallion, which had not yet arrived, or so I thought. But when I returned to Manchester to collect some clothes before setting off for a month, I found the medallion waiting for me. It must have arrived while I was down south with the England squad. I unwrapped the parcel as gently as if it contained a breakable object, kissed the medallion, and then put it around my neck. Now I would be all right if I were given the chance to prove myself. If. Wednesday, 22 May. It all came together on the night, and we beat Portugal 3-0 in Lisbon. We scored once in the first half from a diving header by Jim Noble, and at halftime I received the stroke of good fortune for which I'd been hoping and praying. I was brought on as a substitute. That was the piece of luck I needed, and I made a resolve to put the following 45 minutes to good use. Good luck, good luck, good luck. Everything I tried came off, and I ran through my repertoire of tricks. I was playing a bit deeper, more in the midfield than usual. George Hardy was still away through injury, but I managed to score the second goal myself, jinking my way through from inside our own half, and I laid on the pass from which Bob Horton scored the final goal, making a neat volley from 10 yards out. As we left the pitch at the end of the game, it was good to hear the crowd cheering us. As I went into the dressing rooms, I gave the gold medallion a tacit vote of thanks. I felt confident I'd won back my place in the team, but I still experienced nights of restlessness, nights in which I'd wake up from dreams and nightmares. Always they involved Jane, always they concerned her dying, always I woke up covered in sweat, feeling weak, and strangely experiencing some form of foreboding. Always they served to keep me awake for the rest of the night, but I'd got the medallion back, and all other things counted for nothing when set against that fact. Thursday, 23 May. We flew from Lisbon to Linate Airport in Milan, and from, or is it Linate Airport, and from there continued our journey southwards on the motorway to the south. As two of our first three games were due to be played at Florence, we made our way to a hotel just outside Prato, about 15 miles to the northwest of Florence itself. With our first game, which was against Kuwait, due to take place the following Thursday, we settled down to do some relaxed training, concentrating on practicing over and again movements that were aimed to make us play more collectively, and to guide us, we had those notes made by the manager. I rang Jane, but there was no reply from her phone. Friday, 24 May, again I rang Jane, and again there was no reply. In fact, I rang her 3 times without getting an answer. Wednesday, 29 May, still no reply from Jane's phone. Tuesday, 4 June, I can't believe it, or at least I don't want to. This time, when I rang, the phone was answered by a man whom I presumed to be her uncle. I spoke one of the few phrases that I'd learnt from Jane, had been practicing it for some weeks. Paso parlar con la signorina Jane, but that only served to send him off speaking a torrent of Italian, which I couldn't understand, so I merely said that I didn't understand. Non capito, murmured over and over again, and went to look for the interpreter. When he came and made the call to Jane's uncle, I noticed that his face grew grimmer and grimmer every second. Suddenly, he said a few quick, sharp words into the phone, nodded several times, and hung up. He came over to me, took my elbow, and walked me away several yards, as though we were going to somewhere more private. Suddenly, he stopped, turned his face to me, and said in a low voice, "That was a relation of Jane's." "Yes," I said, "her uncle." He nodded and looked at the floor for a long time before he said, in a soft voice, "He told me that 3 weeks ago she was killed in a car accident." He looked straight at me then. 3 weeks ago, the 15th of May, the night when I'd had the terrible nightmare, the night when I'd imagined Jane was burying my child and had wanted to keep that fact a secret to herself. And he comforted me as I burst out crying. Sunday, 16 June. The competition is half completed, and we have won our group. In fact, we were determined not to undervalue the Kuwaitis and scored 5 good goals. And against France, we ran in 3 more. Both of those games were played in the open stadium at Florence, but against Hungary, we had to travel up the motorway to Bologna and found ourselves playing a very well organized team, which gave our defense, superbly marshaled by Tom Kennedy, quite a handful of work to get through. At the final whistle, we ran out victors, but it was only by the odd goal in 3. And one of our goals had come from a penalty. The stadium, which lies to the west of the city, resembles a bowl. A stadium that gives you a very strong impression of being hedged in. Before the game, we were given the grim news that Jeff Hardy would be out through injury. He struck me as never having quite recovered from the savagery he received when we played against the Scots. Once or twice he had pulled up in training, an expression of pain in his eyes, and slowed down markedly. And although he played in our first 2 games, his left leg had received a further strain in the match against France. When I met him in the hotel corridor 2 days before the Hungary game, he was still limping slightly. No, Jeff, I asked. He shook his head and slowly walked past. But in our attack, both Jim Noble and Neville Smith had been on superbly sharp form. The former using his great strength and wonderful sense of balance to carve out openings, and the latter making swift, determined bursts forward and using his skillful footwork and ball control to score on many occasions. That first game against Kuwait took place only 2 days after I'd heard the news of Jane's death, and during the first half, I'd given the defender marking me, Salim, no trouble at all. But during the second half of the game, I found myself able to switch my mind completely on to football. And the same thing in that game against France. I found myself going through periods during which I was able to concentrate completely on the football, and periods when the image of Jane came close to me. Jane with that blood across her front, Jane with those cornflower blue eyes opened wide as they registered her state of shock, Jane with that scream at the back of her throat. Even during the game against Hungary, those images cropped up frequently. Wednesday, 26 June. We played and beat West Germany this evening. Won 3-1. All of our goals coming during the first half. Neville Smith scored twice with neat play and thunderous shots from 20 yards out. And Jim Noble got the third with a spectacular overhead bicycle kick. But during the second half, Jeff Hardy, the key person in our midfield, wrenched his left knee and had to hobble off. And in the midfield of the opposition, Hagen played his big heart out, clearly surrounded by players much less clever than himself. But the crowd at San Siro Stadium in Milan admired his play and gave him a big hand of applause whenever he touched the ball. As for me, I had to go off after being caught in a sandwich, and when I came to be taken to the dressing room to receive some treatment, I was still a bit woozy. I didn't take much notice as the doctor asked for my jersey to be taken off so he could clean up some small scratches, but in doing this, they completely stripped my top half. Medallion, chain, and all, and in the ensuing rumpus, it completely disappeared. I was too sleepy to pay much notice and still a bit drugged as I left the stadium. But during the following night, I kept dreaming about the ghosts of people who'd been near to me, and I became certain that the medallion was missing. Of course, I had experienced dreams about Jane while wearing the medallion, but those dreams now were more frightening. Nightmares about people being killed over and over again, about pints of blood, about fearful noises while they were going down. Sunday, 30th June. We were beaten in the final by Italy, backed by that maniac crowd in Rome. Knowing that they couldn't lose, aware that they would each receive millions of lira, I think it is, for winning, and a near pillaring for losing. They always say that if you want to win the World Cup, you have to be blessed with 4 or 5 great players in your side, but you also have to be blessed by luck. Italy had a stroke of luck in playing all of their games in the tournament at the Stadio Olimpico in Rome, and they had this superbly gifted central attacker, Roberto Cianfinelli. He had been told of his prowess. We had been told of his prowess at our team talks with regard to the other countries taking part in the competition. But on the day, there was nothing, absolutely nothing, that our defense could do to slow him down. I could see Tom Kennedy's patient. Let me start again. I could see Tom Kennedy patiently trying all the skills he knew to hold the center of the defense tight, and he seemed to cover acres of territory, giving help to his colleagues. But Cianfinelli seemed to be blessed with all the attributes you could name. He had pace, courage, flair, an exceptional sense of balance, superb reflexes, along with the gift of lightning acceleration and an explosive left foot shot. His courage helped him climb so high when the ball was in the air, and Kevin Durkin in our goal knew absolutely nothing about a header that flew past his right shoulder in the second half. That made the score 3-1 in their favor, and it stayed like that until the final whistle. In fact, both Neville Smith and Jim Noble became so fed up with receiving little ball from midfield, where Mick Bish had taken the place of Jeff Hardy, that they fell back hungrily and tried to win the ball around the halfway line. Neville did have the minor satisfaction of finishing the tournament as the leading scorer. As for me, every time I touched the ball, I felt uneasy and was prone to make crass mistakes. Those words of my father's kept running through my mind. Now then, I know, and then knows that's just playing silly buggers. Get on and show 'em. And at one moment, when the ball went out of play near my part of the touchline, I looked up and saw them standing there. Saw them as clearly as though meters had been converted to centimeters. Both my father and Jane, both staring at me. Dad with his soft brown eyes, and Jane with those eyes of hers that were cornflower blue. They were both shouting, Dad pointing his forefinger at me and telling me to get stuck in. To fight, lad, fight. And Jane, in that dress of midnight blue, just kept shouting my name in that particular, peculiar way of hers. Graham, trying to pronounce letters such as the H that she found difficult. But try as I might to make it up to them, I always came back to feeling guilty about Jane's death. The knowledge that when she had her fatal accident in the Medallion, the Medallion was sitting in a state of solitary confinement in my flat in Manchester. And I swear it, I did play my heart out to try and redeem myself in their eyes. But as the match went on, I noticed that I was being starved of the ball, even when I fell back to play in midfield. It must have been no surprise to the crowd when I came to be substituted 20 minutes before the final whistle, and when I looked up at both Jane and Dad from the bench, I saw they weren't following the play, but just staring at me coldly. Extract from the Manchester Courier, Thursday, 4 July. Enrico Piatti, age 45, was taken into custody yesterday and is helping police with their inquiries into the death of the United International footballer Graham Hadfield, who received 2 shots through the heart from a .32 Beretta pistol. Piatti, a local restaurant owner, is the father of Hadfield's late fiancée, who died tragically in a motorway accident in Italy in the middle of May. Now, I don't know what the fuck that's all about, but yeah, that's a weird ending, to say the least. All right, I'm done.